So without further ado, Miss Erika Fabian.
Thank you. This is the cover of the book. And it's actually me at age 16. After I got to America, I decided that as long as I have an introduction to the book which explains that my older son asked me to write a family story because he said, when I pass away, his kids won't know anything about my side of the family. When I started to write the story of my family, I could not do it in first person because it was too painful. So I'm a novel writer as well as nonfiction writer. So I said, okay, I'll write it like a novel. And so it turned into a novel. I was able to actually include, because of that, a tremendous amount of political history that was taking place in Hungary, which is where I was growing up. But the things I'm going to read today, and there's a lot of humor and even a lot of sex in the book, but today I'm going to read you 4 different sections. One of them is the very first page of the book, how the book starts during World War II, when I was 4 years old. And then a couple of other chapters, and I explain it as we go along, what I'm going to read. By the way, the book is called Liar's Paradise, and somewhere in the book I explain why it's called that. It's because through my entire early life, everybody I knew was lying about everything around us, otherwise we wouldn't have survived. And after World War II, when the communists took over the country, we were told that we were living in socialist paradise. So I'm calling it Liar's Paradise. So here's the first chapter. The banging at the front door of the apartment went on and on. Piry was my mother. Piry lay in bed, rigid with fear. When the pounding first penetrated her consciousness, she assumed that she was asleep and was having a nightmare. As the hammering continued, it struck her that she was awake and the reality was worse than a nightmare. A man at the front door really was trying to break it down. Panicked, Piry sat up, clutching her duvet cover, feeling paralyzed as she heard a rough male voice demand, wake up, everybody downstairs." The room was dark, only a streetlight filtered through the wooden shutters. It's not even dawn, she thought. She listened to the kicks at the door, then she heard a bullhorn coming from the courtyard of the building, instructing all Jewish tenants to gather downstairs. So they weren't trying to break her door down. They were merely trying to awaken her, she thought, and with some relief. Suddenly her bedroom door burst open, and she gasped but quickly smiled as her 2 daughters tumbled into her bed. Mommy, someone is kicking the door. Why don't you open it?" they demanded, shivering from the cold and fear. Piry put her arms around Judith and Erika and pulled them close to her under the goose-down cover. "Keep quiet," she whispered. What could she tell them, Piry wondered? That she was as terrified as they were and had no answers, that they ought to get out of bed instead of huddling under the cover and obeying the bellowing instructions to go downstairs? Then what? Where would they be taken? It was late fall, and there were more and more stories going around Budapest about Jewish tenants being evacuated from entire buildings and transported to God knows where. Some said to labor camps in Germany. If only Zoltan were here, she thought bitterly. Zoltan, her husband, had been gone for nearly a year. Not a word had come from him in all that time. If she were by herself, she might dress and go downstairs, Piry thought. But what would happen to 2 small children in a labor camp? No, she wasn't going to abandon her children to fate. She peered at her daughters in the dark, their solemn little faces raised toward hers, expecting answers. She smoothed back their hair, Judith's a sand brown and Erika's a wavy honey gold, so much like her own, and she could see the fear in their eyes. We are going to stay put, she thought. Ignore the kicks at the door, the bullhorn, the shuffling feet of families as they passed down the corridor, down the stairs to the courtyard. It was a terrifying decision. She knew what would happen to them if the man broke down the front door. It took all her willpower to stay calm as she quietly explained to her children, "They're SS soldiers, Hungarian Nazis called arrowhead men. Let's stay quiet so the men will go away and we won't have to go downstairs." Why do they want us to go downstairs? Erika, irrepressible 4-year-old, whispered, her luminous hazel eyes filled with fear. "Can't you hear, stupid? To take us away, so shut up." Judith hissed at her little sister, her 7-year-old heart filled with fear and anxiety. Erika knew what taking away meant. One day her father stopped coming home from work. Mother had explained that a war was going on and he had been taken away to a labor camp to work for the war. Erika couldn't imagine what she and Judith would do if they were taken to a camp, but she knew with all her heart that she didn't want to go. So that's how the book starts. The next segment is actually sort of a continuation of this first event in the book, which is that at that time, Piry, my mother, had to go to a village in Hungary to pick up legitimate Christian birth certificates that were given to us by a maid who used to work for us, so that we could live as Christians freely in the city during the war. But while she had to go away, she didn't have any place to put us. So she put us into a Red Cross hospital and said she'll be back in 2 or 3 days and we should behave, and that was that. So this particular event happened while we were at the Red Cross hospital. The second day we were there, I'm reading what happened. As soon as they were done eating, that's Judith and Erika, the nurses rushed them to get dressed and go downstairs. Go out the door and line up in pairs along the wall of the hospital, they instructed the sick children who could barely follow their orders. It was cold and still dark outside. Erika shivered in her overcoat as they waited to be told what to do next. They had been too upset to eat their ration of bread, and just like the day before, Judith had put it into each of their little suitcases. "It'll just make the suitcase heavier. I won't eat mine anyway." "You will when you get hungry. Maybe by then Mommy will come for us." Judith looked at her little sister's face, cute upturned nose, her large hazel eyes staring at her with so much hope, and felt uncomfortable. She wasn't sure at all that their mother would come back or that she would find out where they were being taken. She often wondered if all their troubles weren't caused because their daddy had been taken away and their mother didn't love them as much as their father did. Why else would she have wanted to open the door to those Nazis or leave us at this hospital where now we will be taken somewhere else? Yet she had to believe, like Erika, that their mother would find them. Until then, she was in charge of Erika. "Whenever she comes, we have to be well, so I will take care of us," she said, with a confidence she did not feel. When there was a line so long that Erika couldn't see the end of it, they were told to follow the men in the black uniforms up in front. He walked fast, and there were other men along the line in black leather coats shouting at the children who couldn't keep up. "Move faster or go to the end of the line." Erika would have liked to do that, but Judith wouldn't let her. "Those are really sick kids," she whispered to Erika. "We should stay here." "Why?" Because I say so. You're not my mother. Mommy told me to watch over you, so do what I say. Erika didn't reply. Her sister's face was pale, her big blue eyes dark with determination. Erika didn't feel like fighting her. Walking fast in the dawn light and dragging her suitcase along was hard enough. A light snow began to fall, making the road slippery and slushy as they trudged along. Erika kept her face down, drawing her scarf around her neck tighter so the snow wouldn't get under her coat. She kept switching hands in which she carried her suitcase and saw that Judith was doing the same. Are you tired? She asked Judith. A little. Me too. Maybe we'll stop soon. Judith was trying to console her sister. No talking. One of the men came over to them and prodded Judith's ribs with the stick he was carrying. No talking, just move. In the silence, Erika could hear the heavy breathing of their companions and realized that they too were becoming exhausted. The air was getting colder, and she could see her breath as she labored along. The wind rose, blowing wet snow in their faces, making it harder to walk. But the men didn't seem to care, nor did they seem to have any intention of stopping for a rest. Morning turned to noon. A gray light illuminated the streets till noon became afternoon, and it was getting dark again. They were marching without a stop. Some of the children could not keep up, and they had been left behind with the men in the back tail end of the line. Erika thought she heard a couple of sharp cracking sounds, like when bullets were fired, but Judith did not seem to have heard it because she just continued to walk, her head down into the wind. So Erika trudged on, but found it increasingly hard. Her cheeks burned in the biting gust, and she had to squint against the wet snow assaulting her face. Her calves ached, she could barely lift her legs, and time and again she stumbled over the cobblestone paving. Watch your step, warned Judith, grabbing Erika to keep her from falling. My suitcase is too heavy, Erika complained, making sure she was not overheard by one of the uniformed men. I want to leave it here, not on the road. You can't. Mommy wouldn't like that, whispered Judith. Her face pale, her lips pressed into a thin, determined line. But I can't carry it anymore, Erika whispered back, feeling helpless, afraid to leave her suitcase because of Judith, yet knowing that she would collapse if she had to carry it another step further. Give it to me. Then you'll have trouble walking. Just for a while. Erika felt so sorry for Judith that her stomach hurt as she watched her sister trudge on, carrying both their cases. But she couldn't help herself. Her whole body ached, her neck and face were wet from the snow that kept flying at her. Her soggy scarf no longer kept the water from sipping down her back, making her feel both hot and cold. As the streets turned dark, she was becoming so exhausted that she had trouble putting one foot in front of the other. Then, just when she thought she could not take another step, they were told to stop at a building in front of them. Go through that door, the Nazi uniformed guards ordered them. Inside was a warm entry hall with a warm air hitting their faces. Keep going through the other door, the guards yelled. Past that second door was a giant hall with a great glass dome that the evening sky painted indigo blue. It was already full of children, but the exhausted sick group from the hospital pushed their way in and crumpled to the ground, making spaces for themselves among the others in the hall. Judith pulled Erika with her, carefully stepping around the other children, made them settle against the wall at the far end of the room. It's warmer back here, she told Erika. Okay, that's the second read. Now, some years later, obviously we survived because I'm standing here telling you the story. Microphone, sorry. Can you hear me? Could you hear me reading? Okay. Some years later, under communist rule in Hungary, my mother decided that we were not happy living under communism, and my father did not come back from the war. He died. But I had uncles who left Hungary, and one of them was a rabbi who came to America, and one of them was a physical education expert who went to Israel. And both of them encouraged my mother to send us to them. So my mother, at the very height of communist terror and oppression, decided that we should leave Hungary, we should escape from Hungary. And somehow she found a way, and there was a man we called the man smuggler who collected us and took us through not Hungary's border, but a Slovak border in the town of Bratislava, the capital of Slovakia, because that border did not have mines. The Hungarian borders did. So we went through snowfields for several hours trying to leave the country. We actually left Slovakia. We were in the middle of no man's land, and this is what happened. The year was December 1952. It was a few minutes later, about midway to the Austrian border in no man's land, that they heard a sharp hissing sound as something whizzed by the group. "Down, everybody, Victor," that was the man smuggler. Victor shouted, "They're shooting at us." The group as one threw itself face down on the snow. Piry, Judith, and Erika lay next to each other. Filled with fear and apprehension, they lay and listened as bullets whizzed over them. "We can't just lie here. Let's crawl forward," Erika whispered to Piry. "Stay still or you'll get shot," Piry hissed back, and Erika, against her better judgment, had to obey. Flares lit up the sky. They could hear men shouting and dogs barking, and they knew for sure that their escape failed. Erika lifted her head just enough to see the black mass of their group on the white snowfield, illuminated by the shower of multicolored flares, and she could hear the bullets whistling around them. She knew that crawling forward would now be truly impossible. She buried her face in the snow and waited for what would happen next. It wasn't long before the shouting, gun-wielding border guards and wildly barking huge German shepherds reached the group in the snow. "Stavat, stavat, davai, davai," the border guards shouted repeatedly, and as they spotted the women in the group, they added, "Davai, kurvi, kurvi." Although the Hungarians did not understand the language, the Slovaks in the group and Erika did. Vstat and davai in Russian meant stand up and move. They were being ordered to get up and move. Piry, hearing the words kurvi, knew that they had used the Hungarian pejorative for prostitutes. Pointing at her daughters, she shouted in German, "Kinder, Kinder, nein, kurvi," without even understanding why she spoke in German. But it stopped the border guard for a second. He looked at them and responded angrily, "Kinder niet, kurvi," not children, whores. And waving his gun, urged them to join the others. "Davai, move, davai, move." The many guards quickly lined up the group and pointed back toward the Slovak border. Aided by their wildly barking German shepherds, herded them at gunpoint in that direction. So that's our failed escape. My mother and my sister ended up in jail. My mother and my sister ended up in jail. I ended up in a children's institute that was kind of like for delinquent children. And my father had a cousin who was a very respected, famous journalist who happened to be working in Prague. and she contacted him. She sent him a postcard. And he came and convinced the authorities to release my sister from jail, me from the children's holding jail, and took us to Prague. By this time, I had been in jail for 8 months, so I spoke fluent Slovak, and within a month, I learned to speak Czech, so I could start going to school in Prague. One of the things that happened in that fall in the school is that we were celebrating the creation of the Soviet Union, because at that time Czechoslovakia was also a communist country. And I wanted to participate. I had always been a natural dancer and performer, and I was always in school plays, and I wanted to do something. So I convinced one of my teachers, my headroom teacher, that if I collected a group of girls, I would teach them a Hungarian dance, and we would perform in the assembly to honor the Soviet Union. And my teacher allowed us to do this. So here is what happened. The day of the show arrived. Erika and her dance team stood backstage awaiting their turn. The place was packed with students, faculty, and parents who were able to come to the assembly because it was an official holiday. Piry, Erika, and Judith. Piry was the cousin, Erika was his wife, Judith was my sister. Judith sat somewhere in the back, and Erika was glad they were there. She and her group heard one of the students recite a poem, and then it was their turn on stage. A couple of hours before the assembly began, Sudrushka Pavlova, that was my teacher, and Sudrushka is like comrade in Slovak. Sudrushka Pavlova informed Erika that they had a pianist to accompany them. She asked if Erika had any sheet music of the song to which they were dancing. Erika said, "No, but I could sing it to the pianist to see if he could pick up the melody." The pianist was a crusty middle-aged man with deep lines by his lips and dark piercing eyes that matched his dark brown thinning hair plastered to his skull. He stared at Erika with disapproval. "How can you not have sheet music?" Erika smiled and shrugged. "I didn't expect to be performing here, but I can sing it to you if you could pick up the melody." She did so, and the pianist seemed to have gotten the song. At least he was hitting the keys in tune with Erika's singing. Now the stage manager waved to Erika. It was their turn to perform. Erika gracefully skipped with her dance group onto the stage, leading them center stage. They lined up by twos behind Erika and her partner, facing the audience, ready to start. The pianist was already at the keyboard, looking for the cue from Erika to begin playing. She nodded to him, and he hit the first notes. As he did, all the dancers, including Erika, froze. He was playing a tune none of them recognized. There was no way Erika could start their dance to his music. "Sing," Erika hissed to her group, and started to sing as loudly as she could, taking the first dance steps the same way as they had been rehearsing it for the past 2 weeks. Her dancers quickly picked up her idea and sang with her. The pianist froze at the keyboard without a sound. The dancers could hardly suppress their laughter as they effortlessly sang and danced, bowing to the audience at the end. A thunderous applause followed, as though the audience had realized the initial faux pas of the accompanist and was now rewarding the dancers, not just for their performance, but for their quick salvaging the situation. The assembly was over, and Erika was leaving backstage to join her family. She spotted Sudrushka Pavlova heading toward her and stopped to face her with a grin. "What happened with the pianist?" Sudrushka Pavlova asked. Erika explained that he had not remembered the tune, so she had to take quick action. Sudrushka Pavlova patted her on the shoulder. "Erika, you'll make it no matter where you land." Wow. That's it. Any questions? The rest of it is in the book.
You said you were 4 years old, so are you a 1941 baby? 40. Thank you. Köszönöm.
What happened to your mother?
You know, in 1956, there was a revolution in Hungary. And just before they closed the border down again, when the Russians came back and occupied Hungary again, we managed to escape to Austria. And we all came to America. And we lived here. And my mother's second husband, my stepfather, came. And they had a store. We lived in New York. I was tossed from relative to finish high school first. And then I lived with my mother for a few years in New York. And then I got married at age 19 and started traveling all over the world. And my mother stayed in New York till she died. How old was she? Actually, it's a rather tragic story. My sister had a nervous breakdown after we got back to Hungary from Czechoslovakia from the prison. And when we escaped again from Hungary, she had another nervous breakdown in New York. And by the time she was 25, I was living in Peru with my husband. And my sister finally managed to commit suicide. And 3 years later, my mother never got over the guilt of my sister's suicide, and she too committed suicide. But I have to say that in Hungary, killing yourself is not a big deal. It's very common for people who feel unhappy or miserable or unsuccessful to just take their lives. So this was something they did, yeah. And my mother was only about 55 or so, yeah. Yeah. Any other questions?
You mentioned that you wrote so many books, and would you tell what did you write those books about? What were
Liar's Paradise is actually my 26th book. There were two things I did from the time I could read, which was at age 3. I wrote stories for myself, and I used to dance. And I always knew that I would be a writer. And when I was about 14, I decided, no, I'd rather be an actress than a writer. And I did that too. When I grew up, I went to Northwestern in America. I came to America when I was 16, finished high school in McMacken, West Virginia, and went to live with my mother in New York. And shortly after I got to New York, I was 18, I met my future husband, and we were courting. And he liked to travel, so we got married when I was 19 and a half. And a year later, we ended up in Peru, where he was teaching on a Fulbright grant. So I learned Spanish, and I was writing. A few years later, we came back to America. I had my second son, who's sitting over there, born in San Francisco. After that, we moved to Mexico. And in Mexico, I met a National Geographic photographer. And these were the years when everybody's marriage was falling apart, or we had open marriages. I don't know if you know what that is. And when I met this National Geographic photographer, I helped him do a story in Mexico City. And we worked so well together that I said to him, if you could get an assignment to Hungary, I'd love to go back. By this time, I was 29 or 30. And I'd love to see the country again. And we did that. And then he did a story in Venice, Italy. And I went there too to help him, because I was very good at organizing his photo shoots and talking to people. So gradually, my marriage fell apart, and this new relationship took place. We became perfect partners. And one of those times, I wrote a story about one of our trips, and he said, "Why don't you get published?" Never even occurred to me. But I went back to Mexico City. I was still living with my first husband, and I took my story to a magazine, and they instantly hired me to write articles that no Mexican woman would be able to write, things like about abortion and divorce and, you know, all the topics that a Catholic community could not handle, but I was a foreigner, so I could. I used to do a lot of commercials, so everybody recognized me in the bank, on the street. And slowly, actually, after about 2 years of that, my first husband said, "You either live with me or you live with him, but you can't do both. I'm tired of it." So I had to make a choice. And my first husband and I separated. Our children, much to their regret, and I guess my regret to some extent, had to be sent to boarding school in England. My first husband moved to Paris to work for a pharmaceutical company, and I started traveling around the world as a writer and photographer. And that is when my second husband and I started writing books. A lot of the books that we wrote were photographing London, Paris, Amsterdam, different cities around Europe. There were 3 books that we did as huge economy books for the Indonesian government. So I spent almost 10 years traveling back and forth to Indonesia, fantastic country. And then we taught photography at UCLA and decided to organize photography groups all over Asia and all over the world, something nobody did at the time. We were the first ones to do that. So out of all these experiences, books kept coming out. And once I was challenged, by accident, I took a course at UCLA in what I thought was going to be novel writing, because I had not written novels before. I was writing articles. It happened to be a romance book course, and I thought, I can write this. So I wrote a proposal and went to a romance book conference, and the biggest romance book publisher, Harlequin, offered me a tremendous amount of money at the time to buy my book, because the book was about a trip in Ethiopia that pilots from Santa Monica took to Ethiopia to deliver food to starving area of Ethiopia where the Omo River was flooded. It was something that my second husband and I actually did. We went to Ethiopia with a Swedish pilot and witnessed what he was doing, and 10 years later I wrote a novel about it. So it's called Skyriders, and I have the rights back, and one of the books that I'm going to put online is Skyriders. So books happened along my career, one way or another. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah. My very first book was written with a psychologist, friend of mine, whom I challenged to write a book about how to keep your marriage together. It was very successful. It was published by a big American publisher, and then it was published in paperback for years. And I discovered that publishers only pay you 10%, no matter how successful your book is. They earn all the money because they print the book. So this last book, I am sort of halfway publishing myself and halfway giving to a distributor to publish because of that. Now let's see what happens. You know, it's very odd. My partner was Catholic. And my second partner, my first husband was Jewish. And my 2 sons are Jewish. But my partner was Hungarian origin, came to America as an immigrant, so we had that background. And we were both artists, and he was a National Geographic photographer, and he taught me photography. And so we started working together, and he was a fabulous writer. So we had so much in common. Religion was not one of them, but neither of us really cared. I personally love going to midnight mass at Christmas, and he loved going to the temple with me over the Jewish high holidays. He thought the music and the atmosphere was fabulous. So religion was not an issue between us. Any other questions? Yes.
You have an incredible memory for things. I mean, I don't remember anything from when I was 4. And you have this incredible memory. You once told me that you kept journals. I wanted to know, how early did you start keeping journals, and how many did you keep, and how long, and do you still do it?
Interesting you should ask. My favorite dog of she was a rescue, so I had her for 8 years, and she died last Friday. And I was so miserable that I was writing about it, and it eased my pain. I started writing a diary when I was at the children's prison in Slovakia, in Bratislava. And somehow our keepers didn't mind. They gave us little notebooks. And because I couldn't lock up my deepest, I wanted to write my deepest thoughts and feelings, I invented a code. I still write in that code when I'm really wanting to say something very private. The only thing I took with me from Hungary when we escaped the second time was a suitcase full of my diaries. When I started writing this book, I went back to read the years in Hungary that I was writing my diary, so that it helped my memory. But actually, my very early childhood and the diaries I wrote during my captivity in Slovakia got lost. So I started writing again when I was, 14. And I've been writing ever since. Yeah. I like to write. That's my outlet.
Are you able to express yourself better in a different language and then translate it to English? How does it work in your case?
Actually, I learned English when I came to America. I didn't speak a word of English. So I learned English at 16. But when I was, 3 years old in Hungary, my mother, the custom was for people to speak German as well as Hungarian. So I was in a German-speaking kindergarten. So I learned elementary 3-year-old German. After the war, I learned Russian. In Slovakia, I learned Slovak. In Prague, I learned Czech. When we got to Vienna after escaping from Hungary in 1956, we spent about a month or 6 weeks in Vienna, so I spoke German by the time we left Vienna. I came to America and I learned English within 3-4 months. And every time then, when I worked for National Geographic as a photographer and writer, we would stay in a place roughly 2-3 months. So I would speak the language. I spoke in my life Swedish and Italian and a few other, Indonesian, of course, and a few other languages. But when I write either in English or Hungarian. And once in a while, I use a Spanish word because I speak Spanish daily. You can't live in Los Angeles and not speak Spanish. So, and I love speaking Spanish. I learned it in Peru, and then I spoke it in Mexico. I lived in Mexico for about, I don't know how many years, 8 years, I think. 2 years in Peru, so yeah. But I think in English, actually. That's the language that comes to me. But like I said, I still read books in Hungarian because I don't want to lose the ability to speak fluent Hungarian. I've gone back to Hungary a few times, and each time I go back, I love the country, I love the culture. I'm not crazy about the people. They're very anti-Semitic. Any other questions? Yes?
The diary is in Hungarian.
What?
The diary is in Hungarian.
No, my diary is both in Hungarian and English. The early diaries are all in Hungarian, and they're all written in a code. The later years, the last couple of years, I've been writing my diary online, actually, so it's in English, and anybody could read it if they could get into my computer, which they can't.
I just wondered, what do you see and how do you feel about the societies in general of anti-Semitism coming back and stronger, and how do you and the museum try to correct that and to try to make societies less anti-Semitic? I see it coming in more strongly. I'm not Jewish, but my mother always thought she was Jewish, so I think maybe I have a little bit in me. But I love the Jewish people, and I just respect their humanity and their feeling. I've never met people who have greater feeling, greater depth, understanding of human conditions here, everywhere, but especially anti-Semitism. Do you have any thoughts on that? And
You know, actually, I speak at the museum very often to school children, and I tell them my story of survival during the war, and I encourage them to choose a career that they truly love, because they'll spend their whole life working, so they might as well choose something they love to do. But I try to impress them with my own story, in the sense that that I'm Jewish and I survived, and it's difficult, but here I am. That's all I can do. I can't defend. I was born Jewish. This is not something that you adopt. You're born into being a Jew. And actually, ironically, one of my father's brothers, a physician, married a very beautiful German woman who was selected when she was a child to hand a bouquet of flowers to Hitler, who was visiting her town. That's how German she was, blonde, gorgeous woman. And I got along with her very well. I used to visit my uncle and spend time with them. And after my uncle died, I still went to visit her. And she, at some point, I arrived and she was suffering from something. She was dying. And I wanted her to go to the hospital, and she wouldn't go. And I finally said to her, Marilyn, if you go to the hospital, I'll turn whatever the religion she was at the time. Swear to God. The following year, she went to the hospital, and I saved her life. She had a heart problem, and they saved her. The following year, I went to visit her, and she invited all her friends, and I was backstage and wore a white robe, and I was led out by a very lovely woman to a swimming pool. And I was dipped into the pool and christened. It was filmed. I sent a film of it to my children, who thought I was nuts. But honestly, the one thing the communists kind of left me with is that all religion is useful to people who want to be religious. But I grew up saying religion is the opiate of the masses, which doesn't mean I'm not Jewish and I don't celebrate Jewish holidays, because my mother did. You know, it's custom. But religion is something to me like literature. You know, it's something you read, you enjoy, you do. I like to go to Catholic churches and smell incense because of my childhood. So it's all fine with me. I have nothing against it, except if somebody's anti-Semitic, then I stand up for myself. I definitely do that. Actually, when I went to Ethiopia, it was not only I did not see any Ethiopian Jews, but we went to a sheik's house, and I was told that I have to eat whatever he offers, otherwise I'll get killed. I ate. It was actually, he served bananas and Coca-Cola, so it was fine.
Okay, we're just going to take one more question, but I wanted to address your question just because you asked it, and I think it's important that people know anti-Semitism is, of course, a huge piece of what we're trying to educate people about, both children and adults. You know, one of the oldest forms of bigotry that the world has known. It's been around for thousands of years and continues to kind of mutate and show itself in various ways and conspiracies. And so if you look at our programming, you will see that, you know, we've done everything from looking at the history of anti-Semitism. We've done programming where we've looked at anti-Semitism here in Los Angeles. And there's a wonderful book by Steve Ross called Hitler in Los Angeles. And we actually did a book talk here with Steve Ross. He's a professor at USC. It's a wonderful look at what was actually going on in Los Angeles that people do not realize. There were chapters of, you know, Nazis here in Los Angeles during that time. So, you know, we're constantly both trying to educate people, but also trying to honestly celebrate Jewish culture and Jewish values and Jewish life, because that's part of it too, is just an unawareness of what this very, very, very small segment of people here in this country and across the world, what their lives are like, which is just like everyone else's, of course, just with different traditions and different, you know, religious holidays. So I just wanted you to know, and the rest of the people to know, that's a huge piece of what we're trying to do. And we do a lot of work with the kids in the schools and to make sure that we're on top of that. Last question.
I just want to know that if you, either one of your sons has the lust to travel and find out about people like you did.
Both my parents were big travelers, and my father got itchy feet if he didn't travel within a 2-week period. And I remember he taught me about creating a travel list, because he had this list to be able to repack at short notice and very quickly, which I use to this day. It's incredible how you can forget a tiny little detail on that travel list if you don't look at it. So my brother and I think his air miles must be unbelievable, and I travel a great deal. So it's in the blood from both parents. We're enormous travelers and consider ourselves citizens of the world as well.
Let me just add, I used to stay away from tourism, because normally when I would travel in a place, it was for work, and usually no less than 3-4 weeks or to 3 months. And my attitude has always been not what I'm used to and not what I like, but always eating what they ate, went to their homes and see how people lived, and trying to learn their beliefs, their culture, their interests, because that's why I was there. My values and whatever I lived through is back there somewhere. But right now, I am here. And I want to do exactly, I want to learn how they live, because it enriches my knowledge, my life. And I'm at home anywhere. It doesn't matter whether I'm in Ethiopia or Singapore or wherever. And as my luck would have it, I would often be in places where they were having revolutions and uprisings, like in Buenos Aires and in various places around the world. And I would just try to stay out of trouble and not be there when the tanks were rolling in. But other than that, I love being in wherever I am. One of the problems with that is that I am a citizen of the world, but I can be anywhere. So I chose to live in Los Angeles because it's so international. And I like the weather. But basically, the world is where I live. I don't have a specific loyalty to a home. I have a loyalty to America because it treated me very well. But basically, I love wherever I am.
I think that's a beautiful place to end, Erika. And of course, anyone who wants to come say hello to Erika, put your name on the list. We will be notifying everyone when the books are ready, so you'll be able to purchase the book. And thank you just for joining us, and we hope we see you all again.